Like Wobbuffet and Shedinja, Smeargle's a gimmick Pokemon, but unlike those two where you have a very specific restriction to work with, Smeargle is literally a blank slate of a Pokemon. Introduced in Gen 2, the gen we're going to be running it with, Smeargle is a normal type Pokemon whose move Sketch allows it to permanently learn the last move used against it. In theory, Smeargle can learn any move in the game, save a few like Chatter, Struggle, and some others. You may think you have a ton of options in setting Smeargle up, but there are a few restrictions in your way. One of them is that you can only learn Sketch every 10 levels. Another is that by being able to only copy moves used against you, and by not necessarily knowing what your opponent has and will use, you're kind of playing a game of chance. Another one is that you're limited by the moves opponents use against you. It's not like they're all out there spamming Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Flamethrower, and whatever else. And number 4 would be Smeargle as a Pokemon. It sucks. There's still a bit of context and rambling to go, including the rules, but if you want to skip past that, you can just check the description for the timestamps. Let's start with Smeargle's stats. It's got a base of 250. 250. That puts it in the same league with other giants of the game like Hoppip and Bidoof. Rattata actually has the edge on Smeargle by a whole 3 base stats. Let that sink in. If we check out Smeargle's attack and defense, to say they are abysmal is being generous. Smeargle has the same base attacking stat as Magikarp, Shuckle, and Feebas. The only area that Smeargle, air quotes, excels in is its speed. So, as you can imagine, even if we have some top tier moves, chances are we are not going to do much damage, even if we're around the same level. On top of that, with Sketch, you're forced to do a lot more planning in the moves that you acquire, because you're not just thinking about your next big challenge like a gym leader, but you have to take into account general move coverage. Not only that, our move pool is technically finite. We only have 10 uses of Sketch, and the last opportunity we have is at level 91, so making a plan on what moves you need and when you have them available is the key to victory here. But before we get into the game, it's worth going over my slightly modified rule set from what I'd usually use. Number 1 is that we can only use Smeargle in battle. It's a solo run after all, but we can capture other Pokemon for HM Butler purposes. Number 2 is that we can't use items in battle, but held items are fine. Number 3 is that this isn't a minimum battles run. Those are the types of runs I usually do, but it's literally impossible to complete this as a minimum battles run, so we can feel free to level up if needed, and we will need that. Number 4 is no saves coming, meaning we can't save in the middle of battles for a better result. Our game starts off pretty normal, waking up and eventually choosing our Pokemon. For this run, I've replaced Totodile with Smeargle, and I reset a few times to try and get the best stats I can out of this thing. Thankfully, unlike other games, we have a bit of breathing room before we're in a mandatory rival battle, which is perfect for us because we need to go and get Smeargle its first move. At the start of Pokemon games, you're not really going to find a huge pool of move variety. Right now, between Route 29 and Route 30, we're in the equivalent of a doggy paddling pool. Everything's obviously low level, and most Mons have moves like Tackle and Growl, which leaves us with very few options. Oh yeah, and remember Smeargle's halfway okay speed stat? It's actually working against us. Sketch only has 1 power point, and if you're faster than the opponent Pokemon, you go first, miss with Sketch, and then only have Struggle left. So what are you supposed to do? You can't use an item in battle because your health is full. We also don't have access to Pokeballs just yet. We're left with no choice but to fight the rival and have a no move. Our first go around doesn't go too well because we have to sacrifice a turn to waste Sketch. Then we're relying on Struggle for the rest of the battle. And it's not like we've had a chance to level up because of our restrictions, so we're often getting knocked out. However, we are able to equip a berry to mitigate the damage against the rival and then just struggle our way to victory. Still, Struggle isn't going to get us through the rest of the game. We need a move. Unfortunately, nothing wants to give us a move. Despite going north at Route 29 and trying to hopefully not catch a Pokemon, that isn't working out either. So I decided to try my luck at a trainer battle. We have Joey and his God King Rattata. Now that we have some Pokeballs, we can throw them at the trainer's Pokemon, get rebuffed, and then hope they use an attacking move. However, Joey's Rattata simply refuses to attack us and constantly uses Tail Whip. And it eventually does attack. We've taken all those Tail Whips, so even though we learn Tackle, we're knocked out. But this isn't a minimum battles run. Even though we've been defeated, Smeargle has kept Tackle, so we can actually proceed with the game. In preparation for Faulkner, I decided to level Smeargle a bit. Thankfully, being in the fast level up group is one of the only advantages that it has. I also equip it with a berry because I expect we'll be taking a pounding. We're still rolling with tackle, and it would have been nice to have picked up Thundershot from Fluffy, but they only appear after you've defeated Faulkner, something I think was changed in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Anyway, there's not too much to say about Faulkner. Obviously, we've got a good few levels on him. Despite that, we make it through the battle at just 9 HP. After Faulkner, we can continue through Union Cave and towards the Azaela Gym. There is one mistake I made here. I forgot that there's a fire breather in the cave who has a Vulpix, and Vulpix knows Ember, which would have been more versatile than Peck I ended up copying from one of the Fisherman's Goldine. Either way, we've got no choice but to proceed through Slowpoke Well until we eventually have Bugsy to tackle. Even though we've got around 6 levels on his Pokemon, we're not exactly racking up the damage, even with a super effective move. Despite that, we're able to soldier on through the Metapod and the Kakuna to reach Scyther. Even Bugsy's most powerful Pokemon, and with our pathetic Smeargle, we're somehow able to make it past on the first try. Next up, we have the rival. We're still rolling with Tackle and Peck. We would have been screwed if we only had Tackle against the Ghastly, but even with the level advantage, Peck sucks. Thankfully, one of the advantages of normal Pokemon is that they're unaffected by ghost moves, so Ghastly can only switch between Grudge and Hypnosis. We eventually wake up and manage to KO it. Next up is Zubat, and our only neutral damaging move is Tackle, which, surprise surprise, does awful damage. We defeat the Zubat, leaving only Quilava. With not much in our arsenal, we can only spam attacks and hope we win, but when Quilava gets a crit, we're eventually KO'd. The repeat battle doesn't see a great deal of change in terms of strategy. There's no point in attempting to find an effective move against Quilava, so we just spam attacks until the rival's eventually defeated. Now, it's a good job we didn't sacrifice that sketch slot anyway, because we have Whitney up next. Having progressed through the game a bit, we're starting to encounter more diverse Pokemon and movesets. There's certainly nothing world-beating just yet, because another, let's call it sub-restriction, is that when you need a specific move type, it's unlikely a Pokemon you can battle in the wild or through a trainer will actually have it. Take Whitney's normal Pokemon for example. Ideally, we want a fighting move to use against them. Thankfully, there's a trainer with a Mankey on Route 34. Though it's super effective, we've got the level advantage, allowing us to survive the kick and sketch the move. With our ever-expanding arsenal of moves, we're able to breeze through Whitney's gym until it's time to face off with the Clefairy and Miltank. For Clefairy, we're at level 29. Low Kick does a good deal over half, which is a better result than normal. It doesn't get a hit on us, so we reach Miltank with full health. Low Kick on the Miltank probably does about a fifth, which, while not great, is better than anything else we've got. Miltank hits us with Stomp that deals well over half damage. We use another Low Kick, and though I'm expecting the heal or another Stomp, Miltank instead uses Rollout, which is pretty ineffective, leaving us to Low Kick it right in the udders. We may have gotten a little lucky with that one, but I'm just amazed how little damage Smeargle deals, which isn't boding well for the late game. While we have Ecruteak next and going up against a Ghost type leader works in our favour, none of the moves we have are currently effective. We have Peck, but with its pathetic damage, we'd be better off having a move that's actually super effective against Morty. However, we've currently got two issues. Number one, we need to level up to get in the sketch slot, and number two is we need to find a Pokemon with a psychic move. Another mistake I made was that on Route 38, I wasn't thinking far ahead enough and just breezing through the battle with Mr. Mime, which I should have learned Confusion from. Despite that, on Route 36, there's Psychic Mark. We can just wait until the Kadabra comes out and not have it get flinched multiple times. Eventually, Kadabra will use Confusion. With it sketched, we've now got a decent move for Morty. Before Morty though, I do test the waters with the optional rival battle in the Burnt Tower. Though with 12 levels above his Haunter, Confusion only does over half. Then Haunter loves to use Curse, the bane of any solo run. Magnemite comes out, we then get confused despite Low Kick doing decent damage, and we're just not going to survive. Even trying this battle multiple times, Haunter will pretty much always use Curse, so I end up abandoning it until later. Yeah, it's optional, but it's worth giving it a shot. I even go back at level 35 to see if that makes a difference. Though we do better damage, that curse is a literal death sentence, so I admit defeat for now. Ecruteak Gym isn't going to cause us much of a problem. We're like 20 levels above the Pokemon here. Even if we get cursed, we're powerful enough, well, as powerful as Smeargle can be, to just soldier on through. For Morty himself, Confusion is a one-shot on the Ghastly. It does about 3/4 on Haunter, and we eventually KO'd that too. Gengar, however, is pretty chunky, and Confusion does about 1/3. Gengar thankfully misses its Hypnosises, and without effective moves against us, we can just defeat Morty. At level 39, I try the rival for a final time. Though Confusion still isn't a one-shot and we're cursed, the move functions slightly different in this gen. You don't take the cursed damage if you OHKO the opposing Pokemon, which allows us to get through Magnemite and Zubat. For Quilava, we switch it up to Tackle. Despite the rival's Pokemon getting it hits, we're just bulky enough to withstand it all and take it down. For most people after Morty, you're more likely to head to Cianwood because you get the useful Fly HM, and Chuck's Pokemon are generally lower than Price or Jasmine. However, for Smeargle, things don't quite work out like that. I thought Chuck would be tough, but didn't expect to be getting walled by the trainers in his gym. Against the very first trainer with a Hitmonlee, Confusion does pathetic damage, and Hitmonlee's double kick is wiping the floor with Smeargle. I tried this battle quite a few times, and even if we do make it past the Hitmonlee, you have to go straight into the next trainer battle. We're already on low health, and against Hitmonchan, we somehow managed to make it through the battle after it gets confused. However, I do ultimately decide to scoot off with my tail between my legs and instead try my luck at Olivine Gym. No Fly HM, so we're surfing everywhere for the time being. I figure because we have low kick and Smeargle's attack is a little better than its special attack, it's worth a shot. The Magnemites end up being a breeze despite being confused and getting paralyzed. However, when Steelix comes out and we use low kick, wow, now that is some pathetic damage. Obviously, we get knocked out. Not really wanting to make the move to Mahogany Town and figuring I'll need the move for later anyway, I decide to trawl the swimming routes in the hopes of getting a better water move. Along one of the routes is a swimmer with a Staryu and a Starmie. The latter has Bubble Beam. Most people's go-to move in any gen is usually Surf. However, at this point, and just in the game in general, I have no idea which trainer or Pokemon have that move. Maybe none, and your other choices really aren't any better. You've got Octazooka from Octillery, but it has trash accuracy, Crabhammer, but I don't think any Kingler are available, and Hydro Pump, which is obviously not available. So yeah, we're sticking with Bubble Beam. With that, we head back to Olivine. While we still use Low Kick on the Magnemite, because of Steelix's poorer special defense stat, Bubble Beam should be enough. We've also equipped a Berry to cure Paralysis, which will let us act first against Steelix. Now, when we use Bubble Beam, instead of it doing totally pathetic damage, it does, well, decent enough damage. We get a lucky miss with Iron Tail. Jasmine doesn't heal Steelix, so we can knock it out and finally win. Now we're at level 44 and it's time to see if we can competently make it through Chuck's gym. While our main attacking move against the Pokemon here is still Confusion, we're doing slightly more damage against the Hitmonlee. Its high jump kick just does under half now, but by the end of the battle, we've still taken far too much damage. Then, when we're forced to face the second trainer with a Hitmonchan, we get Comic Punch and are KO'd once again. A few more tries and the situation isn't changing, so we've got no other choice but to head to Price in Mahogany Town. The Pokemon we have decent moves against here are the Dugong and the Piloswine. However, Tackle is enough to take care of the Seal. For Dugong, with its Ice typing, we can rely on Low Kick, which has been really putting in a shift this run. At level 49, its attacks are barely grazing us, and even when Piloswine comes out, we're still relying on Low Kick, which is enough to tank Piloswine's attacks and Price's Hyper Potion. Now we really have no choice but to finally put Chuck's gym to bed. At level 50, we've not exactly blasted through the levels, but if Hitmonlee uses Double Kick, we can survive on just over half health, allowing our Confusion to knock it out in 2 turns. Then, when we're up against Hitmonchan, we're able to survive its attacks and finally get past them. Then it's just a case of making it through the remaining trainers in our path until we can face off with Chuck. Thankfully, Chuck only has 2 Pokemon in Primeape and Poliwrath. A couple of confusions are enough for the Primeape, who decided to go with Leer instead of an attacking move. Reaching level 51, we can learn Sketch again, and I ultimately decide to overwrite Bubble Beam after considering what I've got ahead of me. When Poliwrath eventually comes out, we can hit it with Confusion. It doesn't do over half damage, so when Poliwrath then uses Mind Reader to up its accuracy, I figure a Dynamic Punch is coming. When it unleashes Dynamic Punch, we surprisingly tank the move, but obviously get confused afterwards. With the Pokegods smiling on us, we manage to get the good roll on Confusion and unleash our Confusion to knock Poliwrath out. Who knew at the start of this run, Chuck's gym would be one of the biggest roadblocks? There's a first time for everything, I guess. Chuck and Claire were about on the same level as far as annoying battles go. By the time we rolled up to a gym, we're at level 58 as we battled through the trainers. While I used the sketch slot to learn Thunderbolt from one of the trainers, I battled somewhere along the way. I did use the sketch slot to learn Thunderbolt from one of the trainers I battled somewhere along the way. However, with her Dragon Pokemon naturally resisting the move, I'm saving it more for the Elite Four. In the end, I don't think it was the smartest play, because ideally we needed either a dragon type or an ice type move, and those are really frustrating to come by. Aside from battling Lance, I don't think you even had the opportunity to learn one. As for ice moves, well, we'll get back to that. Things aren't looking great as we're progressing through the gym, with only Tackle as our damaging move. Sure, we have Stab and are vastly over leveled for this portion, but we're just scraping by in most cases. When it comes to Claire, we're facing her at level 59 with Tackle as our best move. We have a berry to cure paralysis, but it's pretty much useless in this battle. The Dragonair will basically spam the move if you're not paralyzed, so you just buy a breather of 1 turn for little return. The ideal state we want to be in is being able to do decent enough damage that we're not getting paralyzed. And with Tackle as our only viable move, that's never going to happen. Even on the occasions we do make it to Kingdra, we're in such poor shape, the thing easily KOs us. However, while I thought I'd managed to get through this battle by grabbing an ice move, it turns out I was more stubborn than I realised and just leveled up instead. In the battle we actually come out on top, we use Thunderbolt, and though it doesn't do much damage, Dragonair gets paralysed. It's then fully paralysed and can't attack, so we use Low Kick and get a crit. Then, when the second Dragonair comes out, we use Low Kick again and get the flinch. When we use Tackle, Dragonair uses Thunder Wave and misses. We then use another Tackle to knock it out. For the third Dragonair, we get another flinch with Low Kick. After another kick, Dragonair misses with Thunder Wave and we can take it down. We've now made it through to Kingdra on full health. Kingdra uses Surf, and that's where I remember a Pokemon using the move. While it doesn't do as much good now, I carry on with Thunderbolt. Kingdra uses Hyper Beam, then, because it needs to rest, we can knock it out. For the Elite Four, I wasn't quite sure what to expect. We get into the first battle with Will at level 69, nice, and still haven't used that 4th sketch slot for anything. Surprisingly, Thunderbolt on the Xatu is a one-shot, and we get Jinx next. I don't want to knock it out because I want to sketch Psychic, so use Tackle instead of Low Kick. However, Jinx then puts us to sleep. After sleeping a few turns, I just decide to reset and try again. Eventually, Will again, I decide to push Smeargle just within range of leveling up. This is so that I can learn Psychic from Xatu. Then, after defeating it, I can level up and get Sketch again. Despite getting confused, we're able to get off a Thunderbolt and KO the Xatu. We level up and I eventually delete Tackle with Sketch. The plan now that I've learned Psychic is to get Jinx to use Ice Punch, so we have a decent move against Lance. But that's easier said than done. Despite trying this approach several times, we're not bulky enough to survive Jinx's moves, and it seems to never want to use Ice Punch anyway, so in the end I've got no choice but to just abandon the strategy. I can't recall if another Pokemon in the wild or a trainer has access to Ice Beam. I think someone did, but I ended up KOing them, because after multiple tries they just weren't using the move. In the end, our more reliable Ice move is Aurora Beam. You can get it from the Seal in the Whirl Islands. What's even more frustrating is that the Seal here are just a few levels away from learning Ice Beam. Anyway, we head back to Will with the same plan as before. Level up to 71, learn Sketch, and then sketch Psychic. Against Xatu, we use Thunderbolt. For Jinx, we wait for Psychic and then Sketch, then use Low Kick. When Executor comes out, the first time I've ever seen it, we can rely on Aurora Beam. Frustratingly, it doesn't make the range. Ice Beam would have been nice. We knock it out. Then we can use Thunderbolt on Slowbro, and finally, Will's final Xatu. For Koga, because we now have Psychic, we can basically rely on that for all his Pokemon aside from the Forestress. While it's a pain, it does eventually go down. What's frustrating about all this is that even though we've got some serious level advantage, we're rarely one-shotting anything. For Bruno, we can mostly rely on our Psychic strategy. However, with Bruno being a fighter, we're coming into this battle with a big disadvantage. While Hitmontop doesn't like using fighting moves, Bruno's other Pokemon do. While we scrape by the Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan, the Pokegods smile on us once again and a Cross Chop from Machamp misses, allowing us to knock it out. Then, for Onix, we use Aurora Beam for a one-shot. Next we have Karen, and it's time for Low Kick to put in some work again. That move has really been an MVP. Umbreon is bulky and trolly, so of course it gets off Confuse Ray. When we eventually knock it out and Vileplume comes out, we lean on Psychic for an Oko. Then for Gengar, while we manage to outspeed it, we don't knock it out. And of course, we get cursed. Thankfully, we're able to one-shot Murkrow, leaving just Houndoom. We sweep the leg on Houndoom, however, we don't quite knock it out. This means Houndoom can use Flamethrower, then Curse activates. Karen uses a Hyper Potion, healing Houndoom, and that's our run over. However, for a first go, that wasn't bad, but it was lucky. In trying to get back to Karen, Machamp has become the big roadblock. Taking hits from Bruno's fighting Pokemon along the way often softens up Smeargle to the point that one cross chop can knock us out. Eventually, we do make it back to Karen, though through luck more than anything. For Umbreon, not only do we get a crit with low kick, we also get the flinch, allowing us to knock it out. Psychic on Vileplume isn't quite doing enough, and we're lucky to avoid Stun Spore before KOing it. When Gengar comes out and we use Psychic, you guessed it, Gengar then uses Curse. We deal with Murkrow and go for low kick on Houndoom. It hits us with Flamethrower, we take Curse damage, and then Karen heals Houndoom. However, the next low kick, Flinch saves us again and we can KO it. Our last hurdle is Lance. Technically, we have moves that are effective. Will they actually be any good? Let's find out. For Gyarados, we use Thunderbolt, and I'm guessing the fact that it's double super effective really saved us there. For Lance's level 47 Dragonite, Aurora Beam just isn't quite making the range, and of course, Dragonite will always go for Thunder Wave. Luckily, we have a berry to deal with that and can knock it out. Then again, we know we're not going to get the KO on the next Dragonite, so it'll have a chance to paralyze us. We then tank a Hyper Beam and manage to knock it out. Aerodactyl will obviously outspeed us and it uses Wing Attack, leaving us on 100 HP, while we use Thunderbolt to nearly knock it out. Even though we take another attack, we manage to knock Aerodactyl out, but we still have a Charizard and a Dragonite to deal with. Charizard comes out, uses Flamethrower, and we're knocked out. Honestly, not a terrible first go at Lance. While it does take us several more attempts to even get back to Lance, with the biggest sticking point being Bruno of all people, we do make it back. Our game plan hasn't changed. However, I did level up because what has been holding us back a lot are those ranges. Thunderbolt for the Gyarados is still a one-shot. Now, when Dragonite comes out and we use Aurora Beam, we now make the range with the insurance of having the Nevermelt Ice equipped too. With it, we can breeze through the Dragonite and not get paralyzed. Thunderbolt is also a one-shot on Aerodactyl. When Charizard's out, however, our Thunderbolt just isn't making the range. But given we're so many levels above Lance's Pokemon, Charizard's Flamethrower isn't that great. We finally knock it out, leaving us with the final Dragonite, and Aurora Beams and Oko. At level 80, we've made it past the Elite Four. So how are we going to fare against the Kanto leaders, and eventually Red? Fresh off the boat, I decided to put Surge off for a while because we don't really have an effective move for him. Instead, we progress through the story until we're able to battle Misty, seen as though we still Thunderbolt. For a Golduck, Thunderbolt is a one-shot. For the Quagsire, we have to switch it up to Psychic, which does good enough damage. Despite its amnesia, another Psychic takes it out. Lapras is bulky, so of course tanks the Thunderbolt. However, it decides to use Rain Dance, leaving us to fry it. For the Starmie, I think I was hoping to learn one of its moves. I think Ice Beam maybe? Either way, I hold off on using Thunderbolt and it ends up confusing us. Again, it's another Pokemon with Surf. However, because of this deliberating, Starmie ends up knocking us out. Next time, I decide to forget about trying to learn anything and just use Thunderbolt on Starmie to finish it off and take the badge. The rest of the gym leaders aren't really worth talking about, as our current moveset is enough to make it through all of them without much hassle. Like most, however, Blue is a tough fight. Our first time around, we're level 85. Thunderbolt isn't quite enough to one-shot his Pidgeot, however, we knock it out and out comes Alakazam. Aside from low kick, which isn't effective, all we have are special moves. Despite that, we can use 2 Thunderbolts to finish it off. Again, and it's a bad habit now, Aurora Beam doesn't one-shot Rhydon. It lets us off and uses Sandstorm. Thankfully, Gyarados, we know we have nothing to worry about. Then, for Executor, like we did with Will, we just use Aurora Beam. For Arcanine, instead of Extreme Speed, it uses Flamethrower after our Thunderbolt, and as long as we aren't KO'd, the battle is pretty much over. However, Blue heals Arcanine, our Thunderbolt doesn't reach the range we need. Now, we get the Extreme Speed and we're KO'd. In the very next battle, we do a little better. When we use Psychic, we get the special defense drop, so our next attack will definitely get the range for a KO. Now for Red, our final battles here. I've still got the moveset I've had since the Elite Four. It's carried us this far, so why not to the finish line? Not only that, we technically only have one more move that we could potentially learn, and not really any more trainers to fight. At level 86, our low kick against Pikachu of all Pokemon does around a quarter. If that doesn't tell you how bad its attack is, I don't know what will. We flinch. Then we go for a Psychic, and we've got unlucky with the flinches and misses here. Despite the full restore for Pikachu, we can use a couple more Psychics to knock it out. Espeon is, as usual, a pain because we have nothing effective. Thunderbolt is atrocious. Low Kick is ineffective. Espeon's Psychic does a ton of damage and we're eventually KO'd. I tried things several more times and it's clear that we're just not getting past Espeon in our current state. Our only real options are to level up as much as we can and then decide on a single move that can potentially carry us through the battle. I end up leveling to 91 and replacing Aurora Beam with Bite for our final move. While Pikachu isn't the most effective test subject to check its power, we eventually make it through to Espeon. Bite is doing okay damage. Unfortunately, Psychic still brings the pain, and though we get close to knocking it out, we miss the range and get KO'd. The very next time, we get lucky with a combination of flinches from Bite and Espeon not attacking us to make it through to Snorlax at full health. Low Kick is so super effective, it takes off about 1/20th of Snorlax's HP. Really gonna carry us through this battle. Snorlax uses Body Slam and takes off a third of our health. Even when the Reflect fades, we're still dealing pathetic damage. However, we then get 3 flinches in a row with Low Kick before Snorlax finally squashes us. It kind of burned up. Even though we're in a position where we can kind of consistently make it through to Snorlax, it's not great. I do equip the leftovers on Smeargle, which with some liberal Low Kicks means we can somehow get past Snorlax. For Venusaur, we actually have an effective move, but Psychic is not quite doing over half. Venusaur readies a Solar Beam, even though it usually goes for Sunny Day. I use Low Kick, hoping for a flinch or at least putting us within range next turn. Solar Beam hits and does a good bit of damage to us. And when we next use Psychic, we just don't make the range. Venusaur goes for another Solar Beam, allowing us to knock it out. For Charizard, I use Thunderbolt, expecting it not to KO. It at least does half damage, but Charizard's Flamethrower absolutely sighs through our HP. We just need Thunderbolt to KO next turn. And it does. Now Red's final Pokemon, Blastoise. We're on 93 HP and have a super effective move. We just need to survive one turn. And Thunderbolt does less than half. But Blastoise gets paralyzed. It manages to then use Surf, leaving us on 13 HP. Leftovers brings us up to 29 HP, but we're not surviving another attack. One more Thunderbolt, come on, crit or paralyze. Blastoise uses Surf, we're knocked out, and we were so close. In trying several more times, I just can't make it past the Snorlax again. The only real option is to level up a few more times until we're level 95. This should help deal with some of those annoying ranges. However, now Pikachu will mostly go for Charm as its first attack, something we can't have happen. Despite this, we eventually get through to Blastoise again, only to get KO'd. Persistence, however, pays off. For Pikachu, we stick to using Psychic, get hit with Thunder, which is fine, and we can knock it out. Not only do we get the flinch with Bite when Espeon comes out, but it crits too. The natural enemy of a cat finally comes out on top. For Snorlax, I went with Thunderbolt because of muscle memory, but then used Low Kick and get a crit and a flinch. After we use the next Low Kick, Snorlax annoyingly uses Rest. We then miss with Low Kick, which has got to be the first time I've seen that. We then get into a back and forth with Snorlax until Low Kick misses again, and then Snorlax uses Rest again. We get into another back and forth and Low Kick misses a few more times, and Espeon didn't even use Mud Slap. When Snorlax wakes up, we get hit with the Body Slam, taking off a fair chunk of health. Getting into Red Bar, things are not looking great, but we somehow knock it out. When Venusaur's out, I use Low Kick to mitigate the ranges, and we get the lucky flinch. We can then shift to Psychic, and when Venusaur starts charging Solar Beam, the battle is pretty much free. Still, we have 2 Pokemon left that can dish out damage, and we're at just over half health. We use Thunderbolt on Charizard, then get hit with Flamethrower. With leftovers, we're at 65 HP. Another Thunderbolt knocks it out, but we've been here before with Blastoise and we're not surviving the next few hits. Thunderbolt, of course, doesn't make the range. We get hit with Surf, being left on 6 HP until Leftovers kicks in. We then use Thunderbolt and it somehow makes the range, knocking Blastoise out. Now that was a pretty fun run. Smeargle stats are absolute trash, but with being limited in just how many moves you can learn and when you learn them, it becomes a really interesting run. If anything, I can't believe how much of an MVP Low Kick became, seeing as though we picked that up before the 3rd gym and stuck with it till the end. But hey, maybe you could have made the run even easier. Feel free to let me know. If you have an idea for an interesting run in the same style, just let me know. And if you want to like or subscribe, then go for it. Until next time, have a good one.